We do have to address the grievances that terrorists exploit, including economic grievances. Poverty alone does not cause a person to become a terrorist, any more than poverty alone causes somebody to become a criminal.
President Obama making the case that poverty and a lack of education are some of the root causes of terrorism during this week's Summit on Violent Extremism. And it's time now for part one of our Sunday group. Syndicated columnist George Will is with us this morning. USA Today columnist Kirsten Powers, Kimberly Strassel from the Wall Street Journal, and Peter Baker of the New York Times. Let's get into what the president said there about jobs and lack of opportunity fueling terrorism in just a second. But first of all, big topic of conversation this coming week on the Hill is going to be the president's request for the authorization of military force against ISIS. Kimberly, do you believe that the president is unduly tying his hands here with some of the provisions that he's laid down?
Yeah, I mean, the way this is rolled just says so much about this presidency. If you look back at other previous authorizations of force, the two that President Bush sent to Congress, the one George H.W. sent when he was going into Iraq, the way that happened is the president had a strategy. He knew exactly what he wanted Congress to authorize. He sent it to him and he said, here's what I need from you to get her done. Up or down vote, yes or no. This president has sent a document to Congress that's like, well, here's my first thoughts. Why don't you guys take a look at it? Let me know, get back to me. And the problem is that what he's trying to do, this is political cover. He wants the Congress to basically agree to codify his ambivalence about fighting ISIS. And that's why the authorization of force has so many problems.
Do you agree, Kirsten, that he's looking to codify his ambivalence here?
No, I think that it's not clear exactly what needs to be done actually in fighting ISIS. I don't think it's an open and shut case, and as much as Republicans have been so critical of Obama, I haven't heard them giving a lot of great ideas other than to just constantly attack him for not calling it by the right name. So I think you can go back to Bush, and great, he did a great authorization. Well, the war didn't go very well. So I think Obama is having a more, it's true he hasn't laid out a clear strategy and he needs to do that, but I think we have to acknowledge that this is a very, very difficult fight, and he's asking to have the authorization. I think that's it's pretty wide, and it will give him latitude to do what he needs to do.
But Peter and George, if the president says, well, I want this authorization for the use of force, but it's only going to be 3 years, and I'm not going to use ground forces in any kind of an engagement, Jack Keane thought that he needs to allow himself a little more latitude here.
Well, what is actually banned when you ban enduring offensive ground operations is unclear, and there's a lot of wiggle room in that. Those who say it's too restrictive say that's too restrictive, and the 3-year limit. You can extend it, for Pete's sake. We do this all the time with laws that are sunsetted.
So you're not worried?
When those who say it is too permissive, that's what worries me. It's too permissive. It authorizes the use of force against associated forces, which could be anything from Boko Haram to half a dozen entities we've never heard of. Remember, this is a president who, unlike any previous president since Nixon first vetoed the War Powers Resolution, all other presidents have said, we think it's unconstitutional, but we will abide by its reporting requirements. This president ginned up a legal opinion that said what we did with 8 months of bombing in Libya did not constitute hostilities, so he did not have to comply. So there's deep and earned skepticism about his intention to abide by any legal restraint.
You mentioned Boko Haram. There is some indication, Peter, that Boko Haram may be adopting at least some ISIS tactics, if not actually beginning to align with them. So having this contingent provision in here to be able to go after associated groups, wise or unwise?
Well, the other thing to keep in mind is that he's not going to repeal the 2001 authorization that George Bush, you mentioned, sent up. So in effect, he's saying that we're going to have a 3-year war, we're going to have no ground forces. But the truth is, he still has the authorization to do all those things, even without any action by Congress or action on this particular resolution, because of the 2001 resolution. So it's more of a political statement, but it does underscore that this is a moving target. What is the target? And that's the question I think Congress is trying to answer.
Let's get to this idea of the president at his White House summit addressing the root causes of terrorism. Marie Harf, as you'll remember from the State Department, was roundly criticized last week for saying something. We'll play that, and then we'll follow it up with a response from Donald Rumsfeld.
We cannot win this war by killing them. We cannot kill our way out of this war. We need, in the longer term, medium and longer term, to go after the root causes that leads people to join these groups, whether it's lack of opportunity for jobs.
It's a little insulting to people who are jobless or poor to suggest that that is the cause of terrorism. The overwhelming majority of the people who are poor or jobless are not terrorists. They don't strap bombs on their children or their women and send them into a shopping center to kill innocent men, women, and children.
So is the White House missing the big picture here? Is this about economic opportunity, or is this about fighting a terrorist religious ideology?
It's hard to have an economic message in a war zone, okay? Most of the Syrians and Iraqis who are getting up every day, they just want to get through the day without being beheaded or burnt alive. And this is the problem, is that, yeah, both of those things have to matter. You want functioning society, and we do know that having successful economies does reduce violence, but there's a priority question here, and you are going to have to go in and get rid of the terror threat first.
Kirsten?
Yeah, well, look, and Jack Keane also acknowledged what Kimberly just said, that what Marie Harf is saying, inartfully as she said, it isn't untrue, that they're you know, if somebody has in the big picture, the problem is that there's probably something else that's playing a much bigger role here, and that's a radical ideology. And so, because obviously every single person who's poor in the Middle East isn't signing up for this. So I do think there's an issue of them being more clear about identifying that, and I understand why they're staying away from the Islamic, calling it Islamic, because they need to bring in partners into this fight who are Muslim.
We're going to cope with their radical ideology by bombarding them with tweets using 350 State Department Twitter accounts. The problem with that is there's an old axiom: you cannot reason someone out of a position they have not been reasoned into. And the idea that the people who say we'd rather like to go off and behead people and crucify them and burn them alive, and you're going to use at most 140 characters to say that's really not very nice. The whole thing is surreal.
And Peter, this is not just a terrorist group. This is a terrorist group that wants to become a state. And if I recall correctly, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, we didn't initiate a jobs program in Iraq to try to beat him back.
No, that's right. And there's a difference between the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda, because, in fact, they want to hold territory. They want, in fact, to be a state, as you say. But, you know, look, what Marie Harf said, frankly, isn't any different than what Bob Gates has said in the past. I think it comes at a moment when our debate, though, is very polarized as to, is this president being tough enough militarily, and it feeds into that conversation.
We've got to take a break here, panel, but we'll bring you back later on the show. Looking forward to that.